Hello everyone, my name is Sam Parsons and welcome to a follow-up of the Super Advanced Tableau Tables. This was an unplanned video that I was going to do today, and this is in response to some of the comments from the original first video that I've uploaded to my channel. So today what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how we can create more than just the two sparklines in the table that you can see on screen at the moment, how you can identify each subsequent sparkline that we add, and can you make it work for years rather than months that was in the original video. This hopefully should be relatively straightforward. I've changed slightly some of the calculations from that original video, the Super Advanced Tableau Tables, just to try and make it a little bit clearer what's happening, what you need to deal with when you want to add more of these sparklines yourself. So at the moment we can see that we've got a cut down version of that original visualization, the original table with all those multiple different marks and different charts. What we have here, we've got three sparklines, one for orders, one for sales and one for profit. If I dive into this worksheet, we can see that it is currently set up in a similar way to before, where we have a pill for the text headers. It's not necessarily needed in this instance. We have a continuous pill for the axis for the orders sparkline, a pill for the axis for the sales part sparkline, and a pill for the axis for the profit sparkline. Why they are, each of these date axes have their own calculation. It's just repeating the order date. It was just I duplicated the order date just to make it a little easier to follow which pill was where. Now what I'm going to do here is we're going to add in another sparkline for the number of discounts that each of our states are giving away, or the value of the discounts that they're giving away. And how we're going to do that is we're going to add in another sparkline, another pill up here. I'm going to ask our continuous measure here on the rows to deal with that additional sparkline. Now this measure here, that if we remember, we had a single calculation that was dealing with the vertical axis for all of the elements in the row of the table. So it was a little bit more complicated than before. But what I've done is I've altered that slightly so it can deal with the different elements that we need to look at today. So we're stepping into some of the more tricky elements immediately. So if we remember, with this pill or with this calculation, we start off by looking for the size of each of these cells, and the size is the number of rows that's making up these cells. So if the size equals 1, so if we have one row of data, then we want to default the vertical axis at 0.5. So our header fields here would be a size of 1, and because there's not multiple marks essentially, or multiple dates as we have in the sparklines, and so because that would size equals 1, we will default the position on the vertical axis at 0.5, which basically puts it straight in the middle of the axis range here. And if we remember from the previous video, what we're looking at here with all the sparklines is we're looking to normalize the data between 0 and 1. So we would be normalizing the sales values between 0 and 1 by taking the actual value for each mark and dividing it by the maximum that's in the cell. And the way we were previously working with the additional sparklines was we had to try and to identify which sparkline we were working on. So we had a test that we had created, and it's been slightly renamed here, but one test for each of the different sparklines that we're working on. And that test was basically looking at whether or not a certain dimension was present on the marks card. And what we're doing here in this the y-axis pill is we're now looking at those tests to decide which sparkline are we looking at. So to start off with, we've gone, is the size equals 1? So are we looking at one of the columns with only one row of data, such as the state value? If it is, then we'll place the mark 0.5 on the scale or on the axis. Else, we then start moving into a series of tests. And we have 4 tests because we're going to have 4 sparklines. So the first test here in the order that I've just written it is we're having a look at the profit. So we're going to try and identify the profit line, which actually is the purple line over here. So we're just, does our test equal 1? And I'll go into what those tests are again. If it does equal 1, then we'll bring back the normalized profit equation. So that's going to place our years at the normalized y-axis point for the profit each of those years. So it's going to say, okay, we've identified that we're in this cell, and so we want to work on the profit, the normalized profit values. The next test, exactly the same thing is going to go on. We're going to test to see, are we looking at the sales sparkline? And if we are, then we're going to do a normalization of the sales, which is taking the sales value and dividing it by the window max of the sales. So that will place those sales numbers between 0 and 1. We're going to repeat that for the orders, and we're going to take a count of the order IDs and take what's the maximum count of those order IDs, which is the orange line. And then when we add in a discount sparkline, we're going to do exactly the same thing for the discounts. We'll have a little test for the discounts, and then we'll say it's the sum of the discounts divided by the window max of discounts to normalize our sparkline. That way, all of our sparklines will be placing the points for each year, we'll be placing them on a common axis scale between 0 and 1. Okay, that's the general logic. So how is this going to actually work in reality? So let's, if we click on our pill at the top here, that will take us to the marks card that we want to look at. And so this pill here relates to this second column. So we've got the first column, second column, and we're looking at orders. So the orange sparkline is for orders. Now, what you'll notice on here is we've got 2 pills here. I actually don't need that anymore. That was just to show the values, and I'm not showing them in this instance. So the only thing that I've got on here now is I've got a state first letter orders pill or dimension. That's only placed on the marks card for the orders. If I move to the for the orders, if I move to the sales, you'll notice again I've got a field that I don't need, but we've got the state first letter for sales. So that's a different pill than the one that we have on the orders. It's a duplicate essentially. And lastly, you'll guess it, we only have the state first letter for profit on this. So these state first letter pills, this is what our dimension tests are running from. And we've created a different dimension test for each sparkline. And that's where our y-axis calculation here, we're having a look at each of those individual dimension tests. One for profit, one for sales, one for orders, and one for discounts when we bring discounts in. So what is our dimension test doing? Essentially what we're looking at here is we're testing to see if the minimum of the state first letter, so we're taking the first letter of these states because it has a one-to-one relationship with the actual state itself. So we want something to be able to identify for individually each row without breaking the rows down into any more detail. We don't want to split these lines by anything. So the most obvious thing to do is to take the first letter from the row pill that we've got up here. And we're testing to say, is the essentially, is the state letter that we're calculating in this equal to the window minimum of that? And the window minimum, that because it's a window or a table calculation, that's going to take into account whether or not we have the state versus letter dimension on our marks card. If we don't, then this test will fail. If it's successful, it will return a 1, and if it's unsuccessful, it will return a 0. And we've got it rolled up into a window minimum, another table calculation here, because sometimes there will be a case where the minimum letter will just naturally, you'll find one row that will meet that minimum letter across the table. What we want to do though is we want to basically say if every row equals each other in this sense, in this calculation, then every row will return a number 1, and then the window minimum of that will always be 1. And that's what we want. We want to find which of these columns will always return a 1. There will be occasions on certain ones where they will return a 0 because it just happens to be on the row that has the minimum or the first letter in the alphabet. But if we roll it up into a window minimum, then those columns will then every row will return a 0, where this statement here isn't present on the marks card. I know it's a bit tricky to sort of get your head around, but essentially what we're doing is we're saying if we put the state first letter for each of these sparklines on the marks card that relates to the sparklines, we can use the table calculations to identify whether or not they are there or not. And that's essentially what we're doing. So, in terms of the table calculation up here, if we have a look at what's going on here, we've got our sales and profit and position, so this is this PIL calculation. Then we've got each of our individual tests, and this is the crucial part, because we want to set up each of these tests so that they work individually for the profit first letter calculation, the sales first letter calculation, and the orders and the discounts. As long as those are set up, then we'll be able to identify which table we're working or which column we're working on. And then the normalization of the profit, that's just for working out the profit directly. And then the sales profit position is just making sure that we're working across in terms of the years. So let's see if we can add in another column for discounts and see how easy it is to set it up. So let's find Sparkline for discounts. So this is our order date. So if I just edit this, and you can see it is just a repeat of the order date field. It's just so it's labelled so I know which pill to use. And also I don't want any conflicts in terms of duplicating the same or putting the same pill on twice and trying to have lots of different aggregations. I don't want any sort of conflicts around that. So if I duplicate the pill, then hopefully that will get rid of any of that stuff. So if I right click on this pill and drag it over here, it will get me the pop-up menu, so I can choose to what level of granularity I want to show my dates. In this instance, I'm going to look at years. I'm no longer in the previous version of the Super Advanced Tableau Tables. The workbook with that was I was using a size calculation to identify the sparklines. I was saying when size didn't equal 1, then it was going to be a sparkline. So when we had multiple rows, in this instance I'm no longer using size to identify that. I was also using size, if size equaled 4 for vertical bars for the years, I was using that to identify differently from the sparklines themselves. Whereas this method, you wouldn't need to use that size calculation to identify which pill you're working on. You could use this method that we're about to build out now. So what we've done is we've added in an extra column, and this is going to be for our discounts. Let's just make this a bit clearer. So let's use discounts. We're not going to show this at the end, but I'll just keep it here so you can see and keep track of which column we're looking at for the discounts. Great. So at the moment we are plotting by year. You can see the years going up and we can see the marks up here for the years, but we're not, it's defaulting at that sales position of 0.5. So it's not recognizing at the moment in terms of the table calculation what we've got here. Now we know we want to be able to identify this column, and the way we're going to identify that column is if we use our state first letter. I'll show you that calculation. Excuse me. This happened in my last video. I must remember to bring water with me. So the state first letter is literally the left first letter of the state and province dimension. And that's the same on all of them. It is just the same calculation, but I've labelled it differently so that we can identify them differently in the table calculations. So for the discounts, I want to bring that onto detail. At the moment though, we haven't told it to do anything in terms of the discounts up here. Interestingly, I think if I bring in profit onto the detail, I was going to say that it would adapt for the profit, but it's not because of something else. Because I haven't set up the calculation for the year in terms of the table calculation. Right. Okay. I thought that might be cool to show you, but let's not do that just yet. Right. So we've got state first letter of discounts. That's the only thing that we need to bring into the marks card itself. Everything else is dealing with the table calculation. We just set it up so we can see the dots on here. I'll just bring the size down a bit so it matches the others. Great. Maybe let's make it green so we can actually see it slightly differently. So okay, so we're working in the green column. So the table calculations, let's go through and set these up. Oh, I should point out just before I do that, let's in the actual calculation for the y-axis, I've already written in the part of the calculation here that says if it's none of these, then do the dimension test or the discounts. So does it equal 1, which we would expect from the test calculation, because we have put the state first letter discounts field on the marks card, so that should equal 1. And if that happens, then we've already set up to say that we're going to do the normalization of the discount numbers. Okay, so that's already been pre-written. So again, like I said, just the table calculations. And all we're going to do is we're going to just copy through what we've done for the previous three. So the sales, profit and position, we're only ticking the year of the sparklines. So we've got year of sparkline for discounts. Already you've just seen this has moved and this has changed, which is fantastic because that's kind of what we want it to happen. I'm going to make sure that we've got the right tests, the tests being calculated at the right level. So here on the year of profit test, the only thing that we don't really want to be selected is the state first letter for profits. So we want to make sure that the year of discounts, the discounts, the first letter, and the year for the sparkline discounts are also not selected in terms of this test. Okay. Normalization of profit, we don't need to worry about, that's just working as it does. The win-min dimension for the year of sales, so this is the test for the sales. Again, we only want the sales, the first letter of sales to be unselected. Transparent doesn't matter, it's just constant throughout all marks, so we don't need to worry about that one. So I'm going to untick these, and untick these. Okay. So I believe we should have, just trying to look at the profile of these lines now. looks like, so as because we've gone through the profit and the sales, it's defaulting to the orders now, the line, because of the order in which the calculation's working in the sales and profit. It's now defaulting, by the looks of things, to the orders, because in the order test we haven't selected. We're saying where we want for the orders test, the only thing to be unselected is the state first letter for orders. We've also got the discounts unselected. So if we select those, then these lines should change, and they do. Now we've got some gaps and we've got some clearly different lines. And same for the year. I'll just move that out. So what this is doing is it's saying it no longer meets this test, because we're saying that the state first letter for discounts doesn't meet that test. We don't want to look at that one. And then the actual test for the discounts, we just want to make sure that the year is selected and the state first letter for discounts is unselected. And that was it. That was as easy as that. It's just following those rules. So the sales profit position, we're just clicking on the years, and then we're going through each of the tests, making sure that the state first letter for that test is unselected. Everything else is selected. Same for the sales, same for the orders, and same for the discounts. So now what we have here is we have 4 sparklines by year. The tooltips are broken because I took off those fields, I just realised. But what we should be able to see, if we go back into this here, if I hide away these now, maybe even if I collapse this up a little bit more, it'll make my headers, just trying to, by collapsing it up, I'm just trying to just show the movement of the actual marks themselves. This one here needs to just, I don't like that it's not sort of lined up particularly well. Something like that. I know, that's really bad. Okay, let's just undo that. Right. If I even just take that out of the way, because that's confusing. But now if we just concentrate on the profile of these lines. So for example, Texas, we can see the orders, this 4-year profile for the orders is different to the 4-year profile of the sales, which is different to the 4-year profile of the profit. And even the 4-year profile of the discounts isn't quite exactly the same as the 4-year profile of the orders. So each of those sparklines is running a different profile. And we can see clearly here that some of the states are not returning anything in terms of discounts. The profit profile is very different to the other two. And between some of the states, these two are very different. So we can clearly see that we're running 4 different calculations for these 4 different sparklines. And that's the whole point of trying to show this, is that very easily we could create a calculation, add in another sparkline, create another test by duplicating this. So in terms of the test that we ran for the discounts, we're just duplicating the same calculation, but we're putting in, this time we want to just identify where we have the discounts state first letter on the marks card. And what I was trying to show earlier was if I was to change state first letter from the discounts to say profit, we should, hopefully if we watch these 2 cells here, get a repeat of the profile that we're seeing in these 2. So state first letter for the profit, and of course this will break. I didn't think of that. So I've just because I've taken off, where is it, in these ones, because I've taken these out, the state first letter of dimensions, take those out a second. There we go. And then because I've now got in here the state first letter for profit, it's no longer returning the discounts profile, it's returning the profit values. So just by changing that marks, changing that dimension, switches what the use of this column is for. It's now, the table calculation is identifying it as a profit column instead of a discount column. So it's quick and easy enough to change them in terms of that. Just going to step back to the end product. So hopefully that has helped with some of the comments in the original YouTube video. Hopefully that's helped. And the last thing I was going to sort of show off was, this is where I'm sort of going in terms of what's possible in using this, where you have orders. So I've got years as the big bars at the back, and I've got months on the bars in front. It's obviously not finished yet because the tooltips are quite rubbish, but what I'm saying is using this method to identify which chart you're in can be quite powerful in terms of what you can now build in terms of a table. It doesn't have to be sparklines, you can use bars to identify this stuff. And again, I'll go into here, and all I'm doing is I'm dual accessing. I'm saying, okay, for the years, I want to create a bar chart that's 365 days wide, essentially. And for the months, just show me the individual bars for the months. I'm colouring them differently, and I've synchronized those axes. So this will be published soon on my profile on Tableau Public. I'm not planning on publishing this one because I don't see that there's an awful lot of value in publishing something this simple. The calculations are all in the other one that I just showed in terms of the bar charts, so you can see how those are run and download it to your heart's desire, I guess. And I guess that's it, really. Like I said at the start, it was a bit of an impromptu video. I wasn't planning to do this originally. Look out for my next video, though. The next video is going to look at the zoom that I created in a visualization. Let me call this up, because I've seen a little interest in that that feature recently, so, and I was going to anyway. It seems to be the right thing for the next video. So if we go back to my Tableau Public profile, what I'm talking about is, watch out for, where is it? It's gone. Here, dynamic zooming. So my next video, I'll go through this, well, some of this. So how can you create essentially a zoom, so you can open up a particular chart to fill the whole area, and when you do, you bring in more information. So we've now got stacked bars rather than, and some extra labeling rather than just standard full bars. Or in this version, I think we've just got extra labeling on the lines, and you can see the lines a lot easier than when it was a lot smaller. So that'll be probably the next video. I'll look at explaining how you go about setting that up and what you need to look for and how that works. And with that, I think we'll call it there. Thank you for watching again. Please do just subscribe. It's very helpful to see that I am still producing content that people find useful. Comment, let me know what you think. Let me know if you think there's a better way of doing any of this, or there are some unnecessary steps. I don't know everything there is in Tableau, so I can always learn from your comments too. Thank you very much.